Chapter 8. Southampton, Saturday, April 6, 1912, 1:45 p.m. Rich people were mad as March hares. Of course, Paddy had not met very many wealthy people except to reach into their pockets. But the gymnasium provided for the first-class passengers aboard the Titanic was enough to prove that the swells were balmy. There was a bicycle that was mounted on a stand, so the wheels never touched the deck. You could pedal until your legs turned to gruel and not move a single inch. If I was lucky enough never to have to lift a finger in my life, I wouldn't build some fancy contraption to make me just as tired as everybody else, that's for certain. He had been sleeping on the exercise mats in the gymnasium's equipment locker for the past 4 nights, ever since the cargo crane had deposited him aboard the ship. He hadn't planned on being here, but he had to admit it wasn't a bad life. Only a skeleton crew had sailed the Titanic down from Belfast, so Paddy had the largest ocean liner in the world pretty much to himself. Living on the nearly empty Titanic was a sight easier than trying to survive on the cruel streets of Belfast. There was plenty of food in the galley, and judging from the size of the cavernous pantries and iceboxes, there was going to be a whole lot more, enough to feed an army. Why, when these shelves were full, even Mrs. Odell's meat pies would seem like the meager scraps he and Daniel used to scrounge from dustbins. Daniel. Just the name was enough to suck the air out of Paddy, and to turn this glittering dream ship into the black dust of the coal that powered her. Daniel was gone, murdered by the Gilhoolis, leaving Paddy with his heartbreak and a string of if-onlys. If only he had chosen a different pocket to pick. If only he hadn't tried to spend that banknote. If only Daniel had been there to talk some sense into him, instead of back in their print shop home, trying to devise a way to sink the Titanic for Thomas Andrews. Paddy felt the drawing beneath his shirt. All he had of Daniel, and all he would ever have. He had examined the diagram, which seemed to show the Titanic with a thick, jagged stripe down the length of her hull. Paddy wasn't sure how this was supposed to sink the unsinkable. It didn't matter. Daniel was dead. And besides, Mr. Andrews had built the mightiest ship in creation. No accident, no storm, no force of nature could destroy this floating wonderland. The sheer length of her equaled the distance from their print shop to the River Lagan. The luxury, the modern inventions would cause the swankiest toff in Belfast to open up wide eyes. The lights ran with real electricity, and there were electric elevators in case you were too rich to walk up the stairs. There was something called a Marconi room, where wireless messages could be sent to other ships and even all the way to shore. There was a heated swimming bath, a squash court, and a Turkish steam room where you could go and sweat, although why anyone would want to do that was beyond Paddy. For the past few days, he had explored the great ship from prow to stern, making a mental note of every hatch, closet, nook and cranny that might serve as a hiding place, should the need arise. Everywhere he looked, there was something dazzling. The 2 grand staircases were massive, solid wood, intricately carved, each topped with a spectacular stained glass dome. It was like being in church, just walking up the stairs. The first-class dining saloon was so huge, so fancy and so gorgeous, Paddy couldn't imagine anyone being able to think about food. Given a choice, the Pope himself would abandon the Vatican in favor of going back and forth between England and America aboard the Titanic. The experience of being on board was so exhilarating, Paddy would have agreed to live there forever. But he knew the Titanic would not remain so empty and free much longer. Already he was noticing more luggage and cargo, and there was definitely an increase of activity on the ship.